Good evening and happy Friday. It is Friday, May 9th, and I'm here for another chapter from the writing project I'm working on about my dad's stories, my dad's life, and the influence it had on me, my brother, and everybody that knew him. And I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy this more and more every week. Write a little bit more, have another story to tell, brings up another memory, which leads to another story to tell. And this has been a really great experience. And I really value the feedback that you've shared with me. I hope you're sharing this, liking it, subscribing, and inviting others to subscribe as we a bigger audience will give an opportunity for more interaction, more feedback, more make it better, make it a better project. I don't want to do this alone, although it's up to me to actually do the work itself. I'm looking to see what messages, what lessons, what sayings will prove helpful, have proven inspirational, or as guidance, or a reminder, or an encouragement, or a challenge, whatever. I want it to be a story people can use, can learn from, can maybe pursue some of the dreams like my dad did, or continue on during a tough time, like we all need to do sometimes. This next chapter is one of those seasons where things didn't work out the way everybody wanted them to, and how do you respond? Is You can tell a lot about a person. How deep are their beliefs? How much do they really believe what they say they believe, uh, when things aren't going well? It's a real test of integrity and steadfastness, and even the validity of one's beliefs. Um, and this period of time in our lives, um, it was one of those where I saw up close and personal how not only my dad's philosophy carried him through a very difficult time, but the lessons we learned from him helped us carry on through that same difficult time. We had him as a role model, as well as what he taught, and it helped all of us get through it, and come out in good shape, I think, and learned a lot in the process. So this chapter is called "I Just Wanted to Be Someone Who Lived," and it covers quite a bit of time. Some of the events in here I'll cover in more detail in separate chapters, but this is kind of an overview of a period of time that I think it gives a lot of insight into how Dad did things, and how he responded to adversity, and how he made sure he brought everybody along with him, and which was really important because adversity can really shake up a family dynamic. Adversity is often the times when families, if they are going to splinter, it's during really stressful times, especially financial stress, um, health stress. There are just stressors in life that can really put relationships to the test. And this is a period of time, well, in our family's history when that was the case. So with that said, I'm going to read this, and if any comments, the chat on. If you have questions, comments, or anything as we go along, feel free. Um, Feel free to chime in, um, and like I say, invite others to come along. So this is called "I Just Wanted to Be Someone Who Lived." Over the course of his life, my dad achieved success by any measure. He enjoyed being around a healthy and happy family. He purchased a custom home on Mona Lake and gave my mom the opportunity to design its looks. They had fun doing that. We had a little slice of heaven in Florida. He bought a houseboat for cruising on Lake Michigan. He appreciated and owned a walk in closet full of custom tailored suits from the finest tailors in Chicago. Our houses usually had an in ground pool in the yard. His company became substantial over 30 years' time in productivity as well as influence in his industry. All of this cost money, and he had a fairly large overhead. Growing up, we didn't have a grasp of the magnitude of his financial obligations. He worked hard and applied his considerable talents to all that he attempted, and it wasn't done in the spirit of grinding obligation and worry. He relished the opportunities and challenges and became a role model to us for managing life, family, and career. By the way, the industry he was in for that 30 years was the manufactured housing business, the mobile home business. He got into it in the 50s after World War II, not long after the war ended. And between the 50s and this period I'm writing about is like the heart of our family life in the 70s in the early 80s is the period of time this took place in. He shared an interesting perspective on opportunity, hard work, and possibilities. He said that he didn't feel so sorry for people that lacked something they wanted as long as they knew it was possible to attain whatever it was. He really felt sorry for and strove to encourage those who did not know that other possibilities for them existed. He met so many people lacking in the self confidence to assert themselves in this world. Influencer Mel Robbins defines confidence as having the willingness to try. Dad had that in abundance. He firmly believed and demonstrated to us and anyone watching that it's all out there for anybody willing to pay the price. The recession of 1981 put all of his beliefs and practices to the test. The conditions to keep Gray Mobile Homes moving forward failed to materialize. He and his advisors made the decision to pull the plug on the company. In a move of pragmatic generosity, he negotiated a way for each manager of one of his locations to take on that location as an independent business. This allowed the creditors and suppliers to reset and spread out their risk and gave each manager the opportunity to own a company of his own. It worked well and over time helped many people build fortunes for themselves. Not my dad, though. In an echo of 1936, Dad found himself needing to find a place to live and a job. Only this time he was 65 years old and not 20. All of the aforementioned things he had accumulated and shared with everyone around had to be sold, except for the clothes. The clothes would remain and continue to serve him well. He did find a job, and that came in the form of an executive position with Fairmont Homes, his primary supplier of homes when he was in business. His house, which became our home once we moved from our place in Muskegon, was a small townhouse condominium on Lake Wawasee in northern Indiana. He had secured a place to live and a job. This was a massive shift for the four of us. Dad never wavered in his pursuit of the next best move of integrity. He remained resourceful and confident that between his efforts, the help of others, and God's goodwill, we would keep moving onward and upward. He reminded us that we still had much to be grateful for and that we weren't done for in any way. I was not privy to his innermost thoughts, only God knows those for sure. I do know what he said, and I do know how he conducted himself and confirmed what I already thought. Dad truly believed what he told us all our lives. He provided leadership and patience for us in this vastly altered lifestyle. He spoke of his life in terms of chapters. He saw the 30-year run of his company as a remarkable chapter in our lives. It had come to a close, and he prepared his heart and mind for a new chapter. He had a vision of what he would be doing next, and it helped him keep that forward lean into life. The job with Fairmont came about due to a long-standing relationship with the company and a close relationship with the owner there. In the late 70s, the market was shaky, and Dad considered getting out of it then. Fairmont Homes and other stakeholders encouraged Dad to keep going. This meant a lot more exposure to financial risk. Jim Shea, the owner of Fairmont, had made a commitment of future support in the event this last gamble failed to pay off. It did not. By 1981, inflation was still raging, and the Federal Reserve had interest rates around 20%. With resources running out and no way to borrow more, it was time to turn the page. Now, like Dad, I had a relatively clear sense of what was coming next. This all transpired during my senior year in high school, and I was headed to Michigan State University in the fall of 1981. Well, excuse me, in the fall of 1982. Dad had established a trust fund when we were young that would pay for college for both me and my brother Chuck. Chuck is a little bit younger than me. I took a summer job at Fairmont Homes working in the yard as a forklift driver while I waited for school to start. It was a huge adjustment for Chuck. He had established himself in our community in Muskegon and enjoyed his friendships, our lifestyle, and his football team. Chuck was undersized for his age, and so was I, and he played football with a tenacity and skill that belied his size. He had a good thing going on in Muskegon, and the move meant a period of anonymity, starting over in football without anybody knowing how well he played the game. It was hard on him at first. To his credit, he drew on the mindset we were raised with and asserted himself at his new school, and it wasn't long before he had a wide circle of friends and an active social life. He actually brought school dances to his middle school. They hadn't hosted one before, and he convinced them to try it. Chuck, like our dad, found ways to get the most out of our new life. The biggest adjustment and possibly the biggest praise belongs to my mom, Andrea. She may have paid the highest price of any of us for the change in fortunes. She also had a close circle of friends and proved to be one of the people trusted, one of the people that was trusted uh, with others' troubles and confidences. She possessed the gift of hospitality and made anyone's visit to our home a warm experience. She volunteered, took remarkably good care of the three guys in her home, and partnered with my dad in all of his endeavors. With this move, all of that had to shift. She proved to be every bit as resilient and determined to keep living life as fully as possible. It wasn't long before our home became the home people came to feel welcome. The women of Fairmont Homes found out there was a role model, friend, and advocate dropped into their midst, and I know she changed lives there, just as she had in Muskegon. Reflecting back on this period of our lives, Chuck asked our then 98-year-old dad a question. They were sitting on the patio of the condo where our dad lived with his third wife, Joyce. They lived in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and Dad was recovering from what we believed was a stroke or a TIA, maybe. He had spent some hard days in the hospital, and Chuck went down to visit. My family was with me in Pasadena, California for the 2014 Rose Bowl. Michigan State had finally made it back to that historic venue. Anyways, while sitting there and knowing what we know now about business and making ends meet, Chuck asked Dad if carrying all those obligations ever made him worry. Chuck asked, "Didn't all of that ever freak you out?" Dad gave it a moment thought and said, "Charlie, I've always believed that there are two kinds of people, ones who worry and ones who want to live. I just wanted to be someone who lived." My brother, when he was telling me that story, marveled at the situation. He was sitting there with a guy who was just out of the hospital, who almost died, sitting there looking back over 98 years of life with all kinds of ups and downs, and mostly ups, especially the way he thought about life, and carried all that debt, had huge, lived large, lived small, lived large, lived small, and ultimately was in a place where he felt comfortable. He had a wife who loved him. He had married Joyce a year or so after our mother died. Um, he made fortunes and lost some and made some others, and then just like I say, kind of settled in there. And it's a lot of pressure. A lot of his company got to be pretty big. He had 8 dealerships, separate locations around the state of Michigan, and each one had employees, customers, suppliers, creditors, um, responsibilities, lots and lots of responsibility, and a lot of moving parts. And that's a lot to keep going. He liked to travel. He liked to be generous with his people. He would pay for trips for his best salespeople. He would do like trips to Europe or other things to just show them his thanks, his gratitude, and keep them motivated. He liked nice things. He liked to eat well. We liked the house on Mona Lake. Some of you that watch us knew us back then, back in high school. Maybe probably came to the house a few times when the folks weren't home. I threw a few parties there, to be honest. Um, just he had a lot of stuff, a lot of bills, a lot of debt, a lot of fun though, and he kept it all going until he couldn't. And I honestly never saw him feel sorry for himself. I saw him say, "It was tough. That's a hard shot to take, but we'll see what comes next." He had this way of going, "Okay, what's next? What do I need to do next? What makes sense to do?" He had this job in Indiana was fascinating to watch the dynamics of it because when Dad's dealerships were humming along, he bought a lot of Fairmont product. He was one of Fairmont's biggest, if not their biggest dealer in the country. And so that meant Fairmont Homes and Jim Shea had to treat him like a very special client, which he was. you go to this 1981 period though, and now dad is an employee. Dad had to answer to Jim, and he had tasks, and he had responsibilities. It was kind of unclear exactly what he did there. He was just there as an advisor. He was there for special projects. He just made himself valuable. He made himself someone that people could talk to. He made himself a person to give wise counsel. My mom got involved at the company, back to work in the workplace for the first time in almost 40 years, and she settled right in. And they were a great team, and everybody at Fairmont Homes loved them. They were just the life of the party. They made their home a place that everyone wanted to be at. It wasn't long after they got settled in at Fairmont that dad found a piece of vacant land on a channel, got a special deal from Fairmont to put a modular home on it. And Reese, next thing you know, he had a speedboat that Chuck and I could water ski with. And he had just kind of recreated a smaller place, but still the place everybody wanted to come and hang out. And my mom, as I said in the story, became a confidant for so many of these women who'd been kind of isolated before. But now they had somebody they could come to, had some experience and had some wisdom. And she helped a lot of people out, sorting things out, um, getting some confidence, making good decisions. She was just always that kind of person that people would come to for advice, for help, for just companionship. She was a wonderful person. But dad had to answer to Jim, and Jim could be really generous, like providing this position for my family. But at the same time, he could also be a little bit vindictive. He could be petty sometimes. He was always paranoid about whether people could really be trusted or not. He had great wealth. He'd been poor growing as a child. He came from poverty, built up this tremendous company, significant wealth, which always made it like a lot of wealthy people. He was always nervous. Do people, can I trust people, or are they just around me for my money? Now, he trusted my dad. That's why he brought him in. But even with my dad, sometimes he would test him. He would treat him like crap over something just to see what would happen. My dad would just deal with it with grace and and uh, and and it would just keep moving along. I asked him one time, how did he make that adjustment from being kind of the kingpin, the guy that was catered to being a guy who had to, be the right hand man to someone who could be pretty obnoxious sometimes. And he said, you know what? He said, what I do when I go to work each day is I try to think of the kind of guy I always wanted working for me when I had the main chair. In other words, he looked to Jim as he understood Jim was the boss, Jim was the president, and his job was to do whatever he could think of to make Jim's life better, professionally. And then he did that. And he saved Jim a lot of times from himself, from his temper and from some of his pettiness. Dad would talk him out of it. Dad would help him think of other things to do. Dad solved a lot of problems before they started. Uh, and he just kept going. And he did that. He stayed at Fairmont for about almost 15 years. And at that point, um, he retired, or he stepped away, and they sold the place down in Indiana, moved up to Grand Rapids, where Chuck and I lived. And we put our heads together, and he put some money into the pot, and Chuck and I bought our own mobile home dealership in 1995. And dad was there for it. And he was 80 starting over again. And we didn't hire him. We didn't make him a partner, but we paid him as a consultant. We treated him like a partner. And he got to run around and do that with us and help us grow our business to be pretty good size until about we got to work with him that way until about 2001. So really it was about 2001 that dad finally stepped away from the professional world in any kind of real capacity. And he would have been 85 when he finally like, all right, I don't work for anybody or with anybody. He would take some phone calls here and there, and people would always call him as a confidant. But that was 2001 was like the end of his professional career. And again, all those different moves. I mean, it just always just what's next? What are we going to do? Always finding cool ways to do cool things. But all that said, all of that, all those businesses, all of that money, all those challenges, IRS stuff, legal stuff, customer stuff, supplier stuff, interest charges, right? And just managing a family, managing a couple of kids that grew up to be kind of wild, like me and my brother, and keeping that all together, keeping my mom happy, even when her whole social world shifted radically, and keeping her happy and valued and dialed in. It was remarkable stuff he did. And like I said, so at the end of all that, coming out of a near death experience, um, Chuck said, didn't you ever just worry about all those balls in the air? Didn't you ever worry about all that debt or all those risks or all that pressure? And he at 98 years old, he could honestly look Chuck in the eye. He says, no. He said, like I said, he's like, I always thought there were two kinds of people in the world, the kind of people that worry and those who want to live. And I just wanted to live. And he did right to the last day. And that was one of the most, um, that was a real lesson to us. Like he really meant it through it all. He lived this by this code that I've been writing about and talking to you about, even when things were pretty rough, and he didn't blink. He just kept leaning into it. And the life he had, my mom passed away when dad was about 80 years old. They'd been married. Um, Let me think now. Got to do this math on the fly. But they'd been married about 35 years when she passed. And with about a year or so after that, he met Joyce, a woman from Cocoa Beach, Florida. They got married and they had 20 years together. And they did amazing. They traveled big chunks of the world. They went to Italy, they went to Turkey, they went to Mexico a few times. Um, they went on cruises. They kept going. Dad's health stayed remarkably good until just the last couple of years. He struggled a little bit health wise, but not that much. Remarkable energizer bunny kind of guy. And Joyce said it was the best 20 years of her life. She was only 61 when they got married. And she said it was the best 20 years of her life. He was exciting. He was fun to be around. And he just wanted to live. So that's that chapter. I just want to be someone who lived. I'm looking forward to writing some more. I'll be back on next Friday. I haven't decided which one to write yet. I'm still working on some stuff I've got. But I'm anxious to hear what you think of this chapter, what you think of that idea. It's a little simplistic, right? There are more than two kinds of people, but that's just kind of how he framed it. And, that you can worry or you can live, and scripturally, he's not too far off because, you know, scripture says things like, hope drives out fear, hope drives out worry, you know, faith drives out fear, faith drives out worry. Paul says, don't be anxious, pray, go live, do, serve, and trust the Lord for the difference, right? And dad just had that lean. And even when there was a lot to worry about, just didn't see him worry. Saw him act. I know he thought. I mean, he pondered things, but I think what I'll write next is a saying he had. We'd sit around, like when our business got rough, when he was our advisor, and Chuck and I got into a couple of tight spots business wise. And we're like, oh my gosh, there's this issue, this issue, and this issue, and this issue. And he'd say, all right, guys, or he'd always call us fellas. Okay, fellas, we know what the problems are. Now what we're going to do about it. And his formula was 10% of your thought and time on the problem, 90% on the solutions. And that's what we're going to write about next. 10% of your time on the problems, 90% of the time on the solution. So that's it. That'll be the next, unless something strikes me different, that's what I'm planning for next week. Thanks for being here. I really value your feedback. Thanks, Shelly, for being patient, waiting for this to come on. I'm glad you and anyone else that watches it live or in replay Again, feedback. Share the links with other people. I'd like as big an audience as I can get because I think it's a story. It's a good story to tell. So thanks again. God's peace. I will talk to you again next Friday. $5 in the world.